When I was in high school, I started off pretty much every school day the exact same way. I would wake up really early, go downstairs, make myself a huge breakfast of an omelet, a bowl of cereal, and a meticulously chopped fruit salad. And then I would walk down to the edge of the driveway and pick up the newspaper and spend the next hour or so just sitting, reading, eating, and just being with myself. And I felt like I really needed this daily routine to process what was going on in my life, to recharge my energy, and to get ready for the day ahead of me. So when I got to college in the fall of 2010, it only seemed natural to continue this habit. So every day I would walk into the dining hall, make myself a plate, and grab a newspaper, or more likely the readings for class that I hadn't done, and just sit with myself, have my own little breakfast club until I felt ready to face the day. And sometimes, if it was an especially hectic or trying day, I would treat myself, yeah, I say treat myself, to a solo lunch or dinner as well. Now, none of this struck me as being odd or abnormal at all until about a month into my first semester. I remember I was sitting in my freshman seminar, which was a class of 15 first-year students and a professor who doubled as our academic advisor. And sometimes we would take the class time to talk about the transition to college life. And one of these times we talked about eating. Now, I remember there was a girl in the class who said that she dreaded meal times because she was terrified that she would walk into the dining hall and not find anyone to sit with. So I look around the room, and it seems like everyone's nodding in agreement. So at this point, our professor suggested, well, why don't you just eat a meal alone once in a while? Now, to me, this seemed like an obvious, natural solution, but I remember the rest of the class visibly recoiled at the idea. And when our professor asked for a show of hands, I was the only person willing to admit that I had eaten one meal alone, let alone several, in the first month or so of college. So I tried to defend my viewpoint. Eating alone is relaxing, I said, and sometimes I would just rather be alone and process my thoughts and regenerate my energy at the end of a long day. But I remember most of the other people in that class said that they had never and would never eat a meal alone in the dining hall for fear of looking antisocial or standoffish or like a loser with no friends. So I walked out of that class and my head was spinning. Were they right? Was I antisocial or standoffish or a loser with no friends? Should I have been forcing myself to constantly engage at all times and try to make as many friends as possible? So I tell you this story about my freshman fall of college. I could have told you one of any dozen of others. I've always been a pretty relaxed and reserved guy, but growing up this was never a problem because I came from a family of similar people, and I always felt really accepted in my idiosyncratic nature. But then I left the nest and landed in college, and suddenly the messages I was receiving from the outside world, like the message about eating alone, changed and changed drastically. Suddenly it was no longer okay to want to spend time by yourself. Suddenly the new norm, the new ideal, is to be constantly surrounded by people, making tons of relationships and contacts and being very gregarious and outwardly engaged. So everywhere I looked, it seemed like everyone around me was sort of buying into this ideal of what a typical college life should be like. And I tried as hard as I could, but I could not shoehorn myself into that mold. I like meeting new people, but I can't spend too much time with them because I do need time alone in my restorative niche just to feel alive. I liked going out to parties, but I would be exhausted by the music and the dancing and those "I can't hear you" conversations you have after just an hour. And I contributed to class discussions, but never as frequently or gregariously as other people seemed to. And I started to feel like something was wrong with me because I never felt as willing or able to engage as everyone else around me. So it took a while before I found the right words to describe this feeling. And at first I thought I was shy, but that's not it. And it wasn't until I read the book Quiet by Susan Cain that I found the right word, and that is introvert. We throw around these words, introvert and extrovert, we throw them around a lot, and I think you all have an idea in your head of what they mean, and you could all probably tell me right now which you classify yourself as, but what do they actually mean? So an introvert is someone who generates his energy by being focused inward, whereas an extrovert is someone who generates his energy by being focused outward. So the stereotypical extrovert needs interaction and social stimuli to thrive. He's a really well-known person. He's that charming and affable man about town who knows everyone and is comfortable in every situation. The stereotypical introvert, on the other hand, requires solitude to feel alive, and he's often misunderstood because he is reserved, withdrawn, reflective, and quiet. Now, I think it's important to note at this point that introversion and shyness are not the same thing. Shyness is about the fear of social judgment. Introversion is about where the individual generates his energy. And I think the difference between introverts and extroverts is really summed up well by an interaction I had earlier this week. I was having dinner with my friend who considers himself to be an extrovert, and I was telling him about all the things I was doing to prepare for this talk. And I was listing all these things and getting progressively more stressed out. And then I said at the end, dang, I forgot, I have to go to this dinner on Saturday night with all the organizers and speakers and everyone else. And he stopped me. And he said, Alec, no, you don't have to go. You get to go. And I stopped and thought about that for a second, and he was absolutely right. So as an introvert, my natural inclination is to be like, oh my gosh, social function, people, stimuli, it's going to be exhausting. I can't believe I have to do this. But to him, that would never occur to him. He loves meeting new people, talking about ideas, and to him, this seemed like an awesome opportunity. And of course, he's absolutely right. So studies have shown that anywhere between a third to a half of the population is comprised of introverts, which means that even if you're not an introvert, the odds are good that the person sitting to your left or to your right is. And of course, these are not definite terms. We're not always Kesha or Kristen Stewart. There is sort of an in-between, and we can exhibit characteristics of both types depending on the time and the context. So it's not an absolute. It just refers to your dominant preference or how you prefer to be most of the time. Now, of course, there is no objectively best personality type, but society often sends us a different message. So from a young age, American culture programs us to subscribe to what's known as the extrovert ideal, which says that having lots of friends and relationships, being gregarious, and being outwardly engaged all the time will lead to success and happiness. Now, we absorb this message from movies, TV, advertising, magazines, social media, and perhaps most importantly, our peers from a very young age. Extroversion is just generally regarded as a more desirable, more worthy, and more valuable character trait than introversion. And consciously or unconsciously, we've all internalized this bias. If you asked people, which do you think they'd say they'd rather be, an introvert or an extrovert? So this is especially true in the unique institution that is the American undergraduate college. Now, college is essentially a giant social petri dish where parties, class discussions, group projects, extracurricular activities, dating, networking, job hunting, all of these things come together in one place. And to navigate this really complex social web, we often turn to the same assumptions that govern society at large, which is the extrovert ideal. So to talk about a few examples. First, to talk about the social realm. In college, generally speaking, those who are judged to have succeeded socially or to be popular are the same people who love massive parties, will belt Miley Cyrus out of car windows with no hesitation, and will try to find a way to make it physically possible to go out 8 nights a week. In other words, extroverts. So extroverts, studies have shown that extroverts also drink more alcohol, have more sexual partners, and exercise more on average than introverts do. And these are all also correlated with social success in college. Whereas an introvert's idea of a good night might be in bed with a blanket and a cup of tea and a good book. Guilty, last night. And so a lot of times, the natural ways that introverts express themselves don't correlate with success socially in college. But it's not just in the social realm that this happens. Think about class discussions, for example. So natural and frequent participation in class comes easily to extroverts. Their hands just kind of float up and they just talk their ideas out as they come to them. But introverts process ideas differently. Introverts have to look at all angles of something, fully flesh out an idea before they feel comfortable articulating it. So a lot of times, the trajectory of a really fast-paced discussion will shoot right by the deliberate and careful introvert, and leaving his or her peers and professors to assume that they either aren't listening or have nothing to contribute, which is often false. And then we all get to senior year and we go out into the world and we start looking for jobs and networking, and we see the same thing happening. Everything that comes with networking, think about it. Cold calling, meeting new people, small talk, self-promotion, mingling at large gatherings. All of these things give extroverts that buzz of social stimulation that they thrive on. But they're really hard activities for introverts who often prefer to spend time in small groups of people that they know well and have trouble talking about themselves. So to a potential employer, an introvert might look meek or unmotivated compared to his extroverted peers, when really he's just expressing himself the way that he feels most natural. So the common thread between all of these things is that extroverts tend to be more responsive to the chemical dopamine, which is that pleasure-giving buzz chemical we get when we attain something like money or sex or power. And introverts aren't as receptive or responsive, I should say, to that. And so extroverts tend to be more motivated to go after these status symbols, and they're accordingly rewarded by society. But what is it inside of all of us that distinguishes introverts and extroverts? Well, I'm not a neuroscientist, not a psychologist, so I can't pretend to know everything about this. But studies have shown that introverts tend to have highly sensitive amygdala. Now, the amygdala is the part of the brain that generates the response to new or threatening things in the environment. So in the caveman days, the amygdala would be the part of your brain that tells you to run the heck away when the saber-toothed tiger comes to your cave, I don't know. But in the modern day setting, the amygdala is the part of the brain that generates our response to a situation like a party full of strangers, or an auditorium full of people watching a TEDx talk, that kind of thing. But that's totally hypothetical. So introverts who have this sensitive amygdala will tend to have dilated eyes or dilated pupils, tighter vocal cords, more of the stress hormone cortisol in their saliva, and higher heart rates than extroverts when facing the same scenario. So this explains why introverts often feel so physically jangled by situations that don't seem to faze others. And a lot of times, I've been there, so I know what this feels like, you feel like there's something wrong with you because you get so overwhelmed by situations that other people find to be really manageable. So the problem here is that metrics of success and failure in a setting like college are so public. So your peers are listening to your comments in class. Your friends watch you flirt at a party. All of Facebook judges your every status update and photo upload. But our responses to these kinds of stimuli are at least partially determined by our genetics, things that happened before we were born, things that we can't control. And so a lot of introverts have a hard time dealing with that because we live in a world that caters to extrovert strengths. So there's an article in the Wall Street Journal this past summer that addressed some of this. It talked about introverts and how introverts can feel happier in social settings, and this was their conclusion. They said, how an introvert can be happier. Essentially, be an extrovert. Which is a great idea. I can't believe I never thought of that. I mean, if I could just get over my lame introversion and do cool extrovert things, like, it would all be okay. But we can't fight our genetics. Obviously, our personalities are partially determined by environment and our experiences growing up and other things that we have control over. But to a certain extent, the way we are is programmed into our DNA before birth. But despite the absurdity of the situation, or the suggestion, a lot of introverts still try, and they try to make themselves over into extroverts. But the problem with pseudo extraversion, as I call it, is that if it's not accompanied by some deeper value or purpose, it just leads to mental exhaustion, physical exhaustion, and a lot of dissatisfaction. Now, the real shame here, I think, is that introverts often sacrifice their inherent strengths in trying to become more of what society tells them they should be. There are a lot of great things that come with being an introvert too, and I call these the perks of being a wallflower. Generally speaking, introverts tend to be able to focus better than extroverts, which allows them to delve more deeply into areas of study. Now, depth rather than breadth of experience is required for mastery, so it's little wonder that introverts tend to be more intelligent and creative than extroverts. And again, studies have shown this is just generally speaking. Introverts also manage risk better than extroverts generally, and can even be better leaders in some scenarios. So if you look through the pages of history, you will find plenty of introverts who have made amazing contributions to humanity. We have Eleanor Roosevelt, Albert Einstein, Steve Wozniak, Abraham Lincoln, Rosa Parks, J.K. Rowling, Warren Buffett, Christina Aguilera, yes really, Isaac Newton, Al Gore, Bill Gates, yeah, thank you. Emma Watson, and Mahatma Gandhi. So Eleanor Roosevelt, Abraham Lincoln, Rosa Parks, and Gandhi all became renowned world leaders not because they wanted attention, but because of their internal convictions about what was right. They often would have preferred to avoid the spotlight. Emma Watson and Christina Aguilera balanced their natural introversion with the energy it takes to perform on the world's greatest stages. Newton and Einstein made amazing scientific discoveries after decades of working mostly in solitude. Steve Wozniak, Al Gore, Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, and J.K. Rowling all embody the mastery in their particular fields that comes with the depth of experience that is so characteristic of introverts. So I think it merits saying at this point, I think maybe it sounds like I'm saying down with extroverts and up with introverts, and that's totally not my point at all. I love extroverts. I'm sometimes jealous of them and wish I could be more like them. But my point is that we have historically looked at extroversion only through a positive lens and introversion only through a negative lens. And when we do that, we're at risk of undervaluing or even sacrificing all of the amazing contributions that the introverted among us can make. And this is true as well in college. So I think it's really important to question the prevailing messages that society sends us about what we should be doing in college. Now, Generally speaking, the people who are presumed to have won at college are the people that date the most, party the hardest, and can keep up with the most busy and overpacked schedule. And that's all well and good up to a point. But if we stop thinking about college as an end in itself and instead as a means to an end, what is it really for? What are we doing here? Why are we here? I think the answer is twofold. First, on an individual level, college is a 4-year period of our lives that we have to figure out what makes us happy, what we want out of life, and to orient ourselves on a path towards that life. We're all on a unique path, and everyone's path is different. So why should we buy into a one-size-fits-all message about what should make us happy? Now second, again, generally speaking, college is where the world's future luminaries are molded. And of course, this is not exclusively true, but to a degree it is. We will all be scientists, politicians, lawyers, doctors, teachers, humanitarians, leaders in our fields when we leave from here. We've already seen that people relying on the strengths of their natural introversion have made such amazing contributions to the world. So why do we undervalue these exact same traits in college, where we hope to be training the world's future leaders? So, with all that said, I would like to leave you with a few parting words. And again, this is also very representative of my experience. My 3 calls for action for you today. First, let's rethink the extrovert ideal. Instead of blindly subscribing to a societally approved message about what should make us happy, let's turn a critical eye on the social norms that govern our everyday behavior and see if they're helping us get what we want out of these 4 years or holding us back. Hunter S. Thompson, the famous journalist and author, he was 20 years old when he wrote in a letter to his friend, "It is not necessary to accept the choices that have been handed down to you by life as you know it." Now, Hunter never went to college, but if he did, I'm pretty sure he would not have blindly bought into the idea of what a typical college life should look like. So my second call to action, try to understand people of the other type. So extroverts, when you're dealing with introverts, please be patient. We're not shy, we're not standoffish, and we're not rude. We just take a little longer to process our thoughts and feelings and react to things. And we like spending time with you, but occasionally we will turn down invitations to do things because we just need to be alone. Introverts, this goes for us too. Extroverts are not social butterflies, they're not loudmouths. They just feel the most switched on and alive when they're around other people. And they don't keep inviting us out to do things because they're trying to exhaust us. They just like our company and want to spend time with us. Third, and finally, see if you can learn something from the other type. I said earlier that introverts should not try to make themselves over into extroverts, and I stand by that. But I think when introverts and extroverts come together, we can really learn something from each other. Carl Jung, who was the father of modern personality psychology, once said, "The meeting of 2 personalities is like the contact of 2 chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." There's a theory out there called the free trait theory that says that if we can define our core personal purpose, why we're doing what we're doing, then we can act any way we need to in pursuit of that goal, regardless of whether we're extroverts or introverts. Our personalities are like rubber bands. They have a definite structure, but they're flexible up to a point and by no means defined. So if we push ourselves outside of our comfort zones in pursuit of what we want most, of what's dearest to us, we can do it. So for an introvert, this might mean asking your crush out on a whim, or participating in class without raising your hand, or giving a TEDx talk. Again, totally hypothetical. Not from personal experience at all. Extroverts, for you, this might mean staying in one night and journaling or meditating instead of going out. It's not easy to push our comfort zones, but then when we return to what's natural and familiar to us, maybe we're bringing a little something more to the table. So I'll leave you with this. Introverts, when you want to eat breakfast alone, have your own little breakfast club, retreat to your restorative niche, do it, and do it with pride. But occasionally, I hope you'll sit down across the table from someone you don't know and introduce yourself. Extroverts, keep on being you with all of your wit and grace and social energy. We love you for it. But occasionally, I hope you will make your own plate, make your own little breakfast club in the dining hall, sit with yourself, and enjoy the quiet. You never know what you might find. Thank you very much.